You might have seen a lot of videos out there with titles like Helldivers 2 saves the gaming industry, Helldivers 2 is the game of the year, and the rise of double-A games. If you think these claims are overrated, rest assured they are not. After pouring 100 hours into this game, we can confidently tell you without a shadow of a doubt that this is the game of the year. And I'd like for all the creators to stop calling it a double-A game. Guys, this is a triple-A, or dare I say, quadruple-A game. As Daniel said, this game costs only $40 and has more value for money than 90% of the games I've played in the last 10 years. It's also a live service game, and you know how much people hate live service games. But this is live service done right. Everything, and I mean everything, in this game is unlockable by playing it. But you don't need to play the game for 5 years just to unlock some premium skins. Alright, this next chapter is for people who haven't played the game yet but are considering it. It's also for people who are already playing but still making some mistakes. Let's start from the beginning. What is Helldivers and the studio behind it? Helldivers 2 is more or less the same for gamers who had the chance to play the prequel. It retains the core gameplay, teamwork-oriented missions, and fun, but it also adds to and improves on the original in clever ways. For one, the developing team throws out the original's top-down perspective in favor of the third person. And while that change seems minor, it's impactful enough to feel like playing an entirely new game. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Bit by bit, let's take apart the cogs that make Helldivers 2's wheels go round. Is the sequel better than the original? Is it worth playing? What issues can you expect, if any? Having won the intergalactic war between Super Earth and its invaders, humanity wastes no time establishing itself as the supreme race. They invest in technology and skyrocket to dominance over the galaxy. Much of their efforts require mining a rare mineral, which, by colossal coincidence, breeds in the bodies of the previously defeated Terminids, or bug-like creatures. For all intents and purposes, humanity farms these alien race creatures, and as expected, the aliens soon break out of captivity and begin wreaking havoc on Super Earth. So once again, the last line of defense for humanity's survival lies in the hands of the Helldivers. What's more, a second faction of enemies, the automatons, or robots for all intents and purposes, forge war against Super Earth. Your mission, therefore, becomes to push the Terminids and automatons back to wherever they came from, alienating them off the face of Super Earth, one mission at a time. Now, the story here doesn't really matter, despite my attempts to lay the groundwork for you. Helldivers 2 is, by all means, a shooter, with friends. It's explosive and frantic, and it hardly gives you room to wonder, hey, why am I doing this in the first place? All that matters is it's a blast, and the type of game that almost always leaves you with the untenable, just one more mission itch. You've probably run into complaints about bugs, connectivity, and server issues. And while, yes, these were quite persistent at launch, the developing team has worked hard to eradicate most, if not all, of them. So, playing the game now runs as smoothly as can be. Very minor bugs may come up, barely enough to warrant mentioning. If anything, what remains glaring in the background are matchmaking issues. You may be forced to join forces with randos online, which is still a blast.
Thank you. Look, you see? They're just passing by. They saw us.
Essentially, you have a war table of sorts. Here, you can see the galaxy in its extensive form. On one end are the nasty Terminid bugs encroaching on your home planet. On the other hand, the automatons are also pushing to claim more territory. Luckily, setting Super Earth free of its invaders is a global effort. I mean it, folks. Every single player on Helldivers 2 is gradually contributing their part to taking back Super Earth's colonies. It's a beautiful implementation, if you think about it, that really stitches the fabric of a brimming community together. Anyway, once you decide which of the two enemy factions to feed your wrath, you select a planet you'd like to conquer, then further pull up the planet's map to choose a specific location you want to take on. Locations have ongoing missions with a progress bar to show how far the efforts on ground are. You can join these missions and help bring them to victory, or select the untouched ones. It's all up to you. You can dive solo or in a team of up to 4. My advice, in Helldivers 2's, is to jump in with a minimum of 3. Missions are challenging as hell, and they don't scale back just because you can't find friends to play with. In fact, you have 8 difficulty levels, and the riskier they become, the higher the reward. Next up, choose your loadout. Careful here. Weapons, along with tactical play, matter most to winning. Laser weapons, for instance, are only better off taking out robots. Once you're done, you get to choose where your drop pod lands. Perhaps you want to land closer to the objective, which will doubtlessly have hordes of enemy barricades waiting for you. Or you can choose to land farther away and explore a bit, taking on side missions while at it. The latter can pay off handsomely by collecting super credits, which are relatively easy to spot. These let you buy various weapons and gear at the shop. Let me sneak in here that you can also pay for the same with real-world money. which has got burning conversations brewing about a pay-to-win system. Save the attractive $40 sticker price point, and you can play the rest of the game entirely for free. You may need to grind it out to level up, but super credits add up far quicker than other more annoying pay-to-win games out there. The meat of the game, combat. Firstly, much thanks to the third person, which, while making combat more intimate, also obscures enemies on the far edges of your line of sight. It means you're constantly on edge, always on high alert for any encroaching enemies. At certain points, you'll feel overwhelmed as enemies spawn in hordes, which is where strategic team planning and communication come in. It's extremely hard to beat this game solo. Yet, bringing along a team also sets you up for potential friendly fire. It's hardly as annoying as the friendly fire in some other games can be. In fact, it keeps you thinking ahead before unleashing airstrikes anyhow. It's hard to imagine that in the middle of the frantic action and fighting for your life, Helldivers 2 is always delivering the goofiest voice lines. But my oh my, as you laugh along, you're also enjoying the limbs flying off of your assailants and praying your tummy parts aren't next. It feels like a constant tug of war with a time-sensitive objective on the horizon. Only when you successfully extract from the battlefield do you receive a ton of goodies for your efforts. The gameplay remains refreshing, with new weapons and gear to scoop up. Missions also randomize enough to hardly feel repetitive. To take a moment to admire the sights in Helldivers 2. From dense forests to snowy battlefields, environments constantly vary in plain wonder and sheer beauty. It feels like distinct planets, with realism in the sluggish movement through waterlogged terrains and the destruction of everything around you. Helldivers 2 is by no means a groundbreaking venture, yet it's close enough to recapture the effortlessly satisfying gameplay we love from multiplayer shooters, with explosively visceral visuals to boot. Now, you have a number of essential missing features, like the ability to jump or dodge. Finding cover can be tricky too, with nearly everything exploding to bits, especially under the might of weapons like pinpoint-accurate rocket launchers. Transport vehicles are missing, too, although rumors hint at a possible future update. Overall, your focus is to perfect the dance between closing in and keeping your distance from the enemy. That said, Helldivers 2 is still a brilliant game that you can find yourself playing nonstop. Despite its shaky start, Helldivers 2 has quickly taken shape to stand out among the slew of new games coming out. It's one of those games that exceeds expectations far and beyond, with gamers running the game for hours on end. Of course, as a live service, its future will depend on how varied and consistent the upcoming updates are. More enemy variety certainly won't hurt. A more seamless matchmaking system, perhaps rapid shifts to the missions. I hear Helldivers 2 now has its own version of a secret dungeon master, capable of messing with other players in real time. Bottom line, the game has a strong start already and is only expected to grow into something bigger. Its missions are a blast from start to finish, where some are just 12 minutes and others longer. Still, you're always completing excursions, wanting just one more round. With friends, the fun becomes elevated to levels only you and your pals can orchestrate. You can focus on hitting the maximum level, amping difficulty and scooping up as much express and rewards as possible, or play it cool just for the fun of it. It's never that serious. If you lose, you load up another excursion. If you win, hell yes, even if it's entirely by accident, it's fun, it's satisfying, and for only $40. Alright, here's how you need to play Helldivers 2. The game's tutorial covers the basics for those donning their Helldiver cape for the first time, but there's a lot more you should know before you're shipped off to the galactic front lines. I've put 95 hours into Helldivers 2 at this point, and have learned quite a bit since I first played last weekend. Thus, I've put together a quick list of 7 essential tips, tricks, and mechanics. While Helldivers 2 emphasizes that you can aim down sights when you drop in with a sniper rifle or call in an anti-materiel rifle support weapon, it's important to note that this is something that can be done with every gun in the game. To toggle this first-person view, first begin aiming in third person as you would normally and then press down on the middle mouse button PC or the right joystick. While you'll always want to fight in third person at close range, using ads is extremely helpful when you're trying to target weak spots at medium range or effectively hit enemies from far away. It's particularly valuable on the R63 Diligence DMR weapon, but also comes in handy with assault rifles, the expendable anti-tank and recoilless rifle rocket launchers, and the autocannon. When to hold your ground and when to retreat and kite enemies back is important, especially when you're fighting hordes of Terminid bugs. Luckily, you can hip-fire your weapons both in front of and behind you when you're doing the latter, which is extremely useful in situations where it would be inadvisable to slow down and go for the usual over-the-shoulder aim. You can do this with your primary and secondary weapons, as well as heavier ones like machine guns and rocket launchers. You won't get a reticle to guide your aim, sadly, but as long as you keep your target centered and use your bullet tracers to make adjustments, you shouldn't have too much trouble. Using explosive armor, Piercing support weapons like expendable anti-tank launchers or the recoilless rifle is the best way to take out heavily armored targets. Many of them can also be damaged effectively by hitting their weak spots with lighter types of attack like small arms fire and autocannon shells. For Terminids, this means aiming at the flesh beneath their armored carapaces, while most automaton units are weak to headshots or damage to the glowing yellow areas on their rear side. Also, keep in mind that even if thickly armored Terminids like the Charger survive being hit with rockets, a significant portion of their armor will have cracked off. This exposes the skin underneath, which is vulnerable to rifle rounds and grenade shrapnel. Another tip: you can one-shot automaton dropships by hitting one of their four-thruster engines with a rocket, which instantly destroys all the bot units it was about to drop onto the battlefield. Notably, this tactic is one of the only ways to beat Helldivers 2's new impossibly hard defense missions, which I suspect Arrowhead will nerf soon. Putting grenades into Terminid nests and automaton fabricators is the best and least resource-intensive way to take them out, but depending on the type and number of nearby enemies, it might not be possible to get close enough to make an accurate throw. Thankfully, these objectives can also be blown up with explosive air or orbital strike stratagems as long as you throw the beacons for them near your target. Two of the best stratagems for this are the Eagle Airstrike and the Orbital Precision Strike, both of which you get access to at the start of the game. The former is a large carpet bombing that hits perpendicular to the direction you threw it, and is a great way to take out multiple nests, fabricators at once. The latter, meanwhile, is a smaller, more direct strike that should be thrown right next to the structure you want to destroy. Helldivers 2's large 40-minute nonlinear missions, you'll often come across small outposts marked on your compass with a question mark icon. These are points of interest, POI, and typically either have a supply pod you can open, shipping containers you can blow open with a grenade, or small loot-filled bunkers two players have to open simultaneously. You won't get any XP or requisitions at the end of the mission for interacting with these, but even so, make sure to do so when you can. You'll only run into a few, if any, enemy units near them, and they're often stocked with tons of ammo, grenades, and stims, as well as samples to collect for upgrades and a handful of requisitions, super credits, or warbond medals. If you're lucky, you might even find a free support weapon. One last thing, I strongly recommend unlocking the autocannon as soon as you can. Out of all of Helldivers 2's support weapons, it's got the best overall balance of handling, reload speed, damage, armor penetration, and ammo economy. It's effective against all but the heaviest units used by the Terminids Chargers, Bile Titans, and Automaton's tank, Hulkmechs, and it can kill even these with just a few shots if you hit their weak spots.
Very nice!